Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 13th, 2021 meeting of the Planning Board for the Town of Chatham. My name is Catherine Halpern. I'm Chair of the Planning Board for the Town of Chatham. This meeting is being conducted by remote participation only, and in a few moments I'll give a few points about our remote participation procedures. I do need to ask if anyone is recording the meeting. It's all right to record the meeting, but you do need to notify us. I'll give you a few seconds in case you're on mute. So also please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. And let me give you some points now about our remote participation procedures. This meeting of the Chatham Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation only in accordance with Section 20 of Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and shall afford adequate alternative means of public access via Microsoft Teams or by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410. That's 1-508-945-4410. And the conference ID number is 531-176-792 #. That's 531-176-792 #. And as I mentioned, you may also join the meeting online using Microsoft Teams by using the link in the agenda that is posted on the town website. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. And as I mentioned, we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. And also just to note, in accordance with town policy, the public can speak on any issue or business item on the agenda during the meeting when recognized by the chair. So a few more points about our remote participation procedure. We'll start out with a roll call of all the planning board members. If you are a non-board member or member of the public, when you're recognized by the chair, before you begin speaking, would you kindly repeat your name and also the last 4 digits of your phone number if you're connected by phone? And we just do this so we can always identify all the speakers. And as I mentioned, after an agenda item has been discussed by the public body, in this case, that's the planning board, I will take comments from non-board members. We will recognize your comments. And when you're recognized by the chair, you may go ahead and speak. That is one point about our remote participation procedure. It's important that we just have one person speaking at a time, and that will be the person recognized by the chair. And then please state your name after you've been recognized so we can always clearly identify who's speaking. Also, all votes that are taken by the planning board tonight will be done by a roll call vote. And at the end of the meeting, we'll close the meeting with a verbal confirmation of the adjournment, and we'll note the time of the adjournment. So if I could do our roll call of planning board members. Art Sprue, are you present?
Art Sprue, present.
And Warren Chain, are you present?
Warren Chain, present.
And Tom Gagan, are you present?
Tom Gagan, present.
All right, and Bob Wirtschafter, are you present?
Bob Wirtschafter, present.
And I understand Bob Dubus will not be able to join us tonight. Roger Griffin, are you present?
Roger Griffin, present.
And this is Catherine Halpern, I am present. And if I could also mention to everyone before we get started, could you if you are not speaking, could you kindly mute your microphones and disable your video? Planning board members should keep your videos on, but please do mute your microphones. Everyone else, if you are not speaking, kindly disable your video and mute your microphones. This will help to lessen the feedback and give greater clarity to the broadcast. One last thing I need to do is to ask if any board members need to recuse themselves from any items on tonight's agenda. I'll give you a few moments in case you're muted. All right, there being no recusals, let's go to the first agenda item. Again, I just want to mention, if you're not speaking, could you kindly mute your microphones and disable your videos? Thank you. Our first agenda item are the minutes for November 22nd. May I ask the board members, does anyone have any corrections, additions, amendments to the November 22nd minutes?
Tom Gagan, Madam Chair.
Yes, please go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, there's a minor typo, not to split
Okay.
hairs, on page 2. If you take a look under long-range planning, please, second paragraph,
Yes.
second to last sentence, it starts draft a letter to the airport commission. And then it says for then, I think it means for them. So a
Yes.
minor point, so just to
Yes, that's correct.
argue how many angels can fit on the head of a pin.
All right. No, good correction. Any other corrections or additions or amendments?
Madam Chairman, this is Warren Chain.
Yes.
It notes under the minutes that the motion to approve them was approved by me, but since I did not attend the November 8 meeting, I abstained.
All right. It does say abstain, Gagan, and Chain. Is that where you're looking? The minutes for November 8th?
It may be correctly noted there. I was just wanting to make certain that it was correctly noted.
Yeah, it says voting aye, Halpern, Spru, Dubus, Griffin. Voting nay, none, abstain, Gagan, and Chain.
All right, we're good. Just
All right.
checking.
No, good to check. Any other amendments? Typos are fine. If you notice a typo, it's great to correct them. Okay, if there's no other corrections, may I have a motion to approve the minutes from November 22nd, including the correction of the typographical error on page 2, as noted by Mr. Gagan.
This is Warren Chain. I so move.
May I have a second?
Art Spruce, second.
All right, let's do our roll call vote. Art Spru,
Art Spru, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
Tom Gagan,
Tom Gagan, approve.
Bob Wirtschafter,
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
Roger Griffin,
Roger Griffin, approve.
and I also approve the approval of November 22nd minutes with the correction as noted. Next item on our agenda is an approval not required for 36 and 37 Steers Point Road. And I think, Mr. Ford, are you presenting on this matter?
I am, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the board. Attorney Michael Ford, representing Patricia Brogan and Patrick Brogan and Patricia Black. Together with me is Sean Riley of Coastal Engineering. Earlier this year, Patrick and Patricia purchased 36 Sears Point Road. They already owned 7477 Sears Point Road, which is next door. And they're desirous of rejiggering the lot line now between the two lots that they own as a result of some improvements they wish to make at 77. And so they've planned to carve out a portion of 36, which is shown on the A&R plan as parcel A, that will be adjoined to 77. And no new lots are created. There's 2 lots there now. There'll be 2 lots after this plan is endorsed, since parcel A will become part of 77. So I'd suggest respectfully, Madam Chair, and I think your staff agrees, that this is eligible for an endorsement as an A&R.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ford. I'm just going to ask board members if you have any questions or comments for Mr. Ford regarding this A&R.
Madam Chairman, this is Bob Warchapter.
Hey,
I
Bob.
do actually have a question because the map indicates that number 36 dwelling is to be demolished. Does that mean it's going to be demolished and something else is going to be built on a smaller piece of property than it now has? Or is it just going to be demolished and nothing built there?
May I respond, Madam Chairman? This is Mike
Yes.
Ford.
Yes, my apologies. Please go ahead, Mr. Ford.
Thank you. Bob, the current plans are to demolish that guest house completely. While it may not be material to your deliberation on an A&R, there is no proposal to rebuild a dwelling in place of the guest house that's being demolished.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Ford? So if there's no more questions or comments, I would ask for a motion to endorse this A&R as presented, as it does meet the requirements for an approval not required, and our action is simply to endorse it.
I move to endorse it.
Thank you. Do I have a second to that motion?
Roger Griffin will second that motion.
Thank you. So let's go through our roll call vote. Art Spru,
Art Spru, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren approved.
Tom Gagan,
Tom Gagan, approve.
Bob Wirtschafter,
Bob Warchapter, approve.
and Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin approve.
And this is Catherine Hepburn. I approve that we endorse the A&R as presented. Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board.
Next item on the agenda is the release of covenant statement of conditions, and this is regarding 202 Lime Hill Road. And again, do I have a presenter? Is Mr. Norcross with us tonight? Is Jamie connected?
Catherine, I don't see Jamie, but if you wanted to move on to the next item, I could give him a call.
All right, why don't we do that? Which is also a release of covenant bond statement of conditions. And this is in regards to 279 Kroll Road. And I think we have Sean is here. Are you presenting for this?
No, this is Bill Riley, Madam Chair.
Okay, are you presenting for 279 Kroll Road, Bill?
Yes, my client's Jesse Carlton. He's the builder.
Okay, please go ahead.
Well, there are two issues. I know I saw Ally's report, and we owe an as-built plan showing the driveway and the drainage, and that has unfortunately fallen between the cracks somewhere. So I've sent that request off to Ryder Wilcox, which we hope to have. Well, I don't have a schedule yet. I hope to have it soon. Ally was kind enough to let us know that there's a little bit of a drainage problem onto our neighbor, Neil Coles. And I'm happy to report that the Jesse Carlton, who's the principal here, had his landscaper install a drain and a dry well and some extra stone. Yeah, tell Jamie that he's got to go online with the planning board. I'll do that for you so you don't have to call him.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's that's sort of where we are. We have a certificate of occupancy for the building. And, we apologize that we failed to follow up on as-built plan on the drainage and driveway, but we'll get that as quickly as we can.
Okay, so we are missing the as-built plan as noted in the staff report for the shared right-of-way to confirm that the roadway and utilities have been installed per the approved plan. Also, we don't have the comments of the director of DPW. And also we have, let's see, I'm kind of quickly reviewing the staff report. We also don't have a maintenance agreement upon, as stated in the statement of conditions, quote, upon completion of the construction of the proposed 12-foot driveway, a 2-year maintenance agreement shall be executed and a maintenance bond of not less than $1,000 shall be provided to the town. And to date, the maintenance agreement and bond have not been submitted. Also, we have received some evidence, which I believe the board received by email. Ally sent out by email. There is some evidence of significant issues of some runoff onto the adjacent lots. And just to note in this case that the staff has recommended that the covenant for this property should not be released until an as-built plan for the shared roadway is submitted and a 2-year maintenance agreement and maintenance bond is submitted. And also that we have confirmation from the DPW director that construction was done in accordance with the approved plan. So
Madam Chair,
yes, Mr. Riley, let me go through the process first. So I just needed to review the staff report. And now I'm going to ask, we're going to go through the board and see if they have questions or comments for you. So Art Sprue, do you have questions or comments for Mr. Riley?
Well, a combination, I think. This is Art Sprue.
Yes.
I did visit the site last week, and I recall that lot 1 had, and you can see some of the contours that are showing on the plan that Ally had. I'm assuming that's Ally who has the plan up. And you can see the contours on lot 1 as they head toward to the adjacent property. It's 259 Crawl Road is the adjacent property. It's a business. I recall when this first subdivision occurred and was submitted to us, that there was a dip in this and the low spot on lot 1 there. And one of the things that it was providing was this drainage for the adjacent property there. So I was sort of surprised to see that there was multiple feet of fill that was put in there. And of course that blocked off, and I'm sure when the pictures were sent that Ally sent around that showed the flooding from the abutter, that was shouldn't be a surprise since there was a significant alteration on lot 1's site. The applicant's attorney stated that there was some corrective action done there, that there was an infiltration basin. I was just out there at the end of last week. I don't know when that was installed in, but there was no basin installed. At least I didn't see anything that was at the surface. So I think that's another component of the as-built that should be provided to us to verify that this was put in and what was put in. Is it what size of an infiltration basin? What's the basis for it? I think that's just as important as all the other items that were mentioned by the staff report. That's all I have, Catherine.
Okay, great. Thank you, Arthur. Warren Chain, comments, questions for Mr. Riley?
Yeah, this is Warren Chain. It's just a point of clarification. I wanted to just be clear that the drawing which shows the proposed drainage easement with a leaching basin that has not yet been installed. Is that correct? Or in other words, the photographs that we've seen of flooding did not occur after the leach basin was installed.
Mr. Riley? Would you like to answer Mr. Chain's question? Mr. Riley? Mr. Riley, you may be muted, but I'd like you to answer Mr. Chain's question. Well, Warren, we've somehow seemed to have lost Mr. Riley.
Well, I believe itself. I saw no
Yeah.
evidence. And I was on the site that the leach basin had been put in. I just wanted to confirm it for the record.
Yeah. Okay.
And, that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam,
Yes, could you just answer Mr. Chain's question?
okay, I need to hear
What's
Mr. Chain's question again.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, Mr. Riley, I just wanted to, just confirm what I believe to be the case, and that is the drawing that shows the proposed drainage easement with a leaching basin is on the map, but the photographs that we've seen of flooding in the adjacent lot or in lot 1 were taken before any leaching basement was installed, and I believe no basin has yet been installed. Is that correct?
Well, so I'm getting feedback. So I don't even know how, but the leaching basin, the proposed drainage easement in the leaching basin is shown on the plan, is at the opposite end of lot 1 from Neil Cole's property, the budding property. And so that basin, the one that's shown on the plan right there, that has been installed. It was installed months ago, in fact. And I just forwarded to Ally a picture my client sent me this afternoon. So apologize for the late notice, but showing the drainage that was installed this week or last week by Mr. Carlton after receiving notice from Neil about the flooding. Yeah, there are actually 2 pictures there. Ally, can you show the second picture too? So that's the drain that's placed exactly where Mr. Cole's picture showed water running from this property onto his. And in my conversation with Mr. Carlton, he indicated that, well, it was true there was some drainage from his property going on to Neil's property. He said those pictures were taken before the town had finished its work on Crowell Road. So the corner of Stepping Stones and Crowell Road was still dug up and not finished. The curb along that side of Crowell Road had not yet been fully installed. And although we don't have a picture of it, Mr. Carlton said to me that he believed that a significant amount of the water shown in Neil's pictures that were sent to Ally, a significant percentage of that water actually came from Crowell Road, not his property, but acknowledging that no water is supposed to go from his property onto Mr. Cole's. He had his landscaper install this drain, and there's a leaching catch basin below with stone around it. And so we're going to get a statement from the landscaper exactly what he installed there, and we'll submit that to Ally as soon as we have it. So we acknowledge that we're not ready for the release of road covenant, I do have one comment about, the chair says, well, we also have to have a statement from the director of DPW. And we have no control over the director of DPW. We'll get an as-built plan and a statement from the engineer who installed the driveway, supervised the installation of the driveway in the drainage over there. And we'll make sure we submit it to Tom Temple. But, I mean, if he doesn't send a report, there's nothing I can do about that.
Okay. Arthur, did I see your hand raised again?
Well,
all right.
Catherine, this is Art Sprue. I just wanted to clarify that I think I went out there Tuesday last week. So if this was done, it was done toward the latter part. But my point is there, whether the flooding comes from the road or whatnot, there was an obstruction put in place by Lot 1's regrading. And I'm glad to see that this catch basin here on 259 Crowell Road was actually installed. But I think it's important, one, that the DPW director concur with this, along with the other aspects, as well as also getting the detail of what this is. Because if somebody comes back and asks us questions associated with this, we need to have something on file to show what it was and where it was installed on 259 Crowell Road to resolve the issue associated with this flooding. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Okay. And so Tom Gagan, questions, comments?
Tom Gagan, yes, Madam Chair. I'd like to piggyback on Arthur's comment, having been down there. I don't know what's there. It may be installed. When I was there, there was standing water. I think it's very important for this board to be able to see testimony from Tom Temple that whatever has been installed actually functions. There's a lot of history in this particular area that the town had to deal with Neil's property. And before we sign off as a board, I'd like to know that the darn thing is working. Not only is it in place, but there's been some rain, some significant rain. I don't want to quantify that, but let's make sure it's working. And again, as I mentioned, there's been a tremendous history of damage done to one of the properties down there. And I don't think we should get involved in not taking it very seriously that wherever the water's coming from the road or from the adjacent new property building, that it's being taken care of.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Gagan. Bob Wirtschafter.
Nothing else to add to this, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. And Roger?
No, I have nothing else to add, but I think I agree. I think it's important we hear back from the PPW director before we, go forward.
Yes. Okay, and this is Catherine. I agree with the rest of the board and with the staff recommendation. I don't think this is ready for approval. I think we do need to see the as-built plans. I think we need to see that everything is working, and we do need confirmation from DPW director. And Mr. Riley, I realize you don't have control over that, but obviously we can. Our Ally will do what she can to put that in order. But in this particular case, we do need to do that. I do agree with the rest of the board. So based on the board's comments, I think we can take a vote, but I think what our vote would be or what the motion would be is that we would not release the covenant as requested. So,
Madam Chair, Tom Gagan.
Mr. Gagan, yeah.
I'd like to suggest a motion for the board, and the
All right.
motion would be to extend the date by which this board reviews this particular property and the drainage. And that would give the applicant hopefully reasonable time to get, and the town to get the ducks lined up. And also with some reasonable time to see if the darn thing's working. So if the applicant would like an extension, perhaps a motion to extend this item could be a vote taken by the board.
To
Madam
continue,
Chair,
to continue the matter. Ally, is that what we would do? We would vote to continue the matter.
If the board wants to vote to continue, that is something that we could do. Our next meeting, just to let the board know, our next meeting on December 27th, that filing date has already closed. So I don't think I could, get the Aspelt plan and things like that to the DPW director and get comments back in time. But our next meeting is in January 10th. And the one after that is January 24th.
yes, we'd ask for a continuance to January 10th, please.
All right, so the applicant has requested, and the board has suggested, and the applicant has requested continuing this matter to our January 10th meeting. May I have a motion to that effect?
So moved. Tom Gagan.
Thank you, Mr. Gagan. May I have a second to that motion?
Art Spru, second.
Thank you, Arthur. So let's do a roll call vote. Art Spru,
Art Spru, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
Tom Gagan,
Tom Gagan, approve.
Bob Wertschafter,
Bob Wertschafter, approve.
Roger Griffin,
Roger Griffin, approve.
and this is Catherine Halpern. I approve that we continue this matter to the January 10th meeting of the Planning Board. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, good. Great. And then now do we have Jamie Norcross connected for 202 Lime Hill Road?
Yes, I'm here, Madam Chair. I apologize for being late.
No worries. Go ahead if you'd like
So
to
this
present
is
this matter.
an old housekeeping matter. I recently represented a client who purchased lot 7 that's referenced on this statement of conditions, and the underlying covenants were released way back when. This was dating back to 1986. It looks like the town also tried to release the statement of conditions back in 1996, but what was on file with the town was never recorded, and it didn't include the recording information for the statements at the registry. So we're just looking to have this cleaned up and recorded, so it's clear for now and clear for the future.
Okay, this is Catherine. Thank you, Jamie. So as I understand it, if I could just reiterate based on the staff report, condition number 3 was approved by the planning board in 1996, but that is not on record with the Registry of Deeds. Is that correct?
That's correct. There was a copy in the file, but for whatever reason, it never got recorded, and there's no original that anyone could locate.
All right. But then in the other cases, let me just see. For the other conditions, we don't have as-built plans, but the staff comment is, to the best of staff's knowledge, for example, all runoff is disposed within the panhandle portion of lot 8. However, the file does not contain an as-built plan. And then also regarding the conveyance of either lot 7 or 8, the release of this condition was approved by the planning. So this is condition number 3, so that we do have on file. So again, our vote, we could approve the release of number 3, which apparently has already been approved and is purely a housekeeping matter, or we could approve the full release of the full statement of conditions. So without the as-built plans as it stands. So with that being said, I think I've summarized it clearly. Can I have comments or questions for Mr. Norcross? Let's go through the board. Art Spru.
Art Spru, I guess the question is if there was a condition asking for an as-built plan, we should receive that condition. I don't have any problem in going ahead and voting a release of this upon receipt of that as-built plan.
All right. And there, what would you think about what I've suggested, that we could vote to release condition number 3, which apparently has already been released but just not recorded, and then the release of the other conditions would be pending the receipt of as-built plans, which could be reviewed by the board, or we could give that to staff review.
I could go along with the latter one on there. Staff review would be sufficient for this. It's not a significant thing, but you know what, the way I am, Catherine,
I do.
as-built plans are very important as far
They
as recording the information. So, and I guess if the board is okay with just release of condition 3, as long as we're not releasing everything, that would be fine.
Yeah, Madam Chair, my clients purchased lot 7, which the condition number 3 only relates to lot 7. So that's the one we were really wanted to get clarified. Given the age of the statement of conditions and speaking to Ally, we thought we might take a shot at having it all released just to avoid any issues down the road for somebody else. But again, really only tonight concerned with lot 7. So if you just want to do I guess a re-release or a confirmatory release of condition number 3 for our lot, that should be fine.
Yeah, essentially we would be confirming the prior release of lot 3 so that it could be properly recorded. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so we could do that, board members, or we could release all of the conditions, or we could release all of the conditions pending the submission of the as-built plans with review by staff. So I'm giving you a few options. And so, Warren Chain, can I ask if you have any questions for Jamie or any comments? And also if you can let us know your opinion about the options that we have.
Yeah, this is Warren Chain. Jamie, just again, point of clarification for me, and that is your client is involved in lot number 7. That's their interest. But the lots 4 and 5 are looking for as-bills, correct?
No, we're just, again, in the title exam, this statement of conditions popped up and it referenced number 3, and that neither 7 or 8 would be conveyed without the septic system being moved. And again, purely as a housekeeping matter, there was one on file with regard to condition number 3. We just want to have one that we're able to record at the registry.
I guess what I'm getting at is, if we release the conditions here, then whatever was required back when will never have been submitted. Isn't that right?
Well, I don't know. The covenant was released, so you assume that the road construction was done in accordance with the plan. Again, we're going back a number of years now. Whether or not lot 8 in the future wants to submit an as-built, I guess that's up to them. But we're only primarily concerned with lot number 7 as it relates to that condition number 3.
Well, just along with Art is, underscored the importance of as-bills, but it seems that if we don't somehow or other get an as-built for whatever was requested for an as-built back when, if we don't do it now, then it'll never happen. Isn't that right?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but again, I think you are within your power to issue a release of number 3 since it already was issued by the town. Again, there is a document in the file. We just need a new one that I can record at the registry. I think the as-built is really beyond the scope of what we're asking today.
This is Catherine. Ally, is it your hand that's raised?
My hand is up and Bill Riley's is as well.
Okay, Ally, why don't you go ahead and then I'll ask Bill to speak.
Okay, great. I just wanted to touch on Warren's request, or not Warren, I'm sorry. Well, Warren and Art's discussion about the as-built plan. So in 1987, when I was looking through the file, it didn't look like at that time an as-built was required. But as staff of today, it's kind of hard to go back and look at these conditions and be able to sign off without one. To the best of my knowledge and to the best of the town's knowledge, I tried to answer them. But I just wanted to clarify that at the time, an as-built was not required.
Okay, thank you, Ally. And Mr. Riley, did you have your hand raised as well?
Yes, I did, Madam Chair, and the, this is just, as a bystander, I have another meeting with you shortly, but I mean, having a plan done today that purports to show it as it was 20 some years ago, I think deficiencies might have been created in the interim that, I don't know who you would expect to correct those deficiencies if in fact they exist. The fact that the covenant was released meant that sometime in 1987 or whatever year it was released, according to the tradition of the planning board at that time, a member of the planning board, typically Skip Kendrick, would go out and look at the work, and then he would go back and report to the board that the work had been done in accordance with the plan submitted, and that's how the covenant would get released. And so I can understand why staff would think, oh, well, it'd really be a great idea to have one, but it imposes, presumably, if you're going to ask, Mr. Norcross's client to pay for it, a burden on him that is completely unanticipated and candidly unwarranted. And and then what are you going to do if the plan shows deficiencies? Who's going to correct those? Would you expect Mr. Norcross's clients to correct them when the road's been there for 30 years, or more than 30 years, and the covenant was released? It's a rabbit hole you can go down, and I don't, if you expect Mr. Norcross's client to take care of everything, I think that's incredibly unfair. Again, because the road was inspected in 1987, there was no requirement for an as-built plan. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. All right, so I think, Tom Gagan, have you had a chance to ask questions or make comments?
Tom Gagan, Madam, I haven't, but I think Arthur Sprue has his hand up. Why don't I divert to his question, please?
All right, thank you, Tom. Arthur, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I think some of the discussion previously helped clarify a few things, especially what Ally had noted.
Right.
The first condition that was there is asking for a specific construction and materials for the driveway. Correct. And she, as she said, it wasn't actually a requirement in the conditions itself. Now, we'd have to fall back on our rules and regulations back from 1986. I'm not sure that it's really necessary to go chasing that down. My observation was, when I was out there to see this, is I concur with the statement that there was a driveway constructed of dustless and durable material, and it does contain the materials that are in my observation. So, and since rather than chasing down an as-built plan, we can probably say that at least addresses that first condition. If it was clear that right there in the condition, regardless of what was in the rules and regulations at the time that said provide an as-built plan on this, I could concur that we should pursue that. So probably we could back off of an as-built plan, at least at this juncture, and just deal with condition 3 and a release up there. And if that's okay with everybody, that would be a suggestion that I would offer the board.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. This is Catherine. but we'll still need to decide whether we're going to approve the full release of the statement of conditions, which means we would not only release condition 3, but we would release the other conditions without the as-built. So we can do that, or if we don't, as board, if we don't feel completely comfortable doing that without additional information, even if we don't require an as-built plan, then what we could do tonight is approve the release of condition 3, since that is really very clearly a housekeeping matter. It was already approved and that is on file, but it was just not recorded with the Registry of Deeds. So I just wanted to make that distinction. I hope I've made that clearly. And Tom Gagan, did you want to go ahead?
Tom Gagan, Madam Chair, I have nothing to add to what's been discussed so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Bob Wirtschafter?
Yes, I think that we should just do what was asked, and that's release the third provision and let everybody go home and be happy and make this simple.
All right. All right, Roger Griffin?
I feel we could tonight. I feel we could release condition number 3 tonight. We could at least accomplish that. No other comments.
Great. So what I'm hearing from the board is that I believe most of the board is completely comfortable releasing condition number 3, but I am hearing that we don't want to act on the other conditions. So that's my assessment. So what I would ask for is a motion that we approve the release of statement number 3 of condition number 3, which essentially has already, we understand, has already been released by a previous planning board, but just not properly recorded in the Registry of Deeds. And tonight we will be voting to approve the confirmation of the release of condition number 3 in this statement of conditions. So do I have a motion to that effect?
Art Spurl, I'll make that motion.
And do I have a second to that motion?
Roger Griffin
Tom
will second
Gagan.
that motion. Yeah,
Okay, great. So let's do our roll call vote. Art Spru,
Art Spurl, approve.
Warren Chain,
I'm opposed. I'd be in favor of releasing all the conditions.
would you, okay. All right. I'm just going to comment that in essence, that also means that you would allow the release of condition number 3. It's just that you would vote to include all the conditions. So, all right.
Madam Chair, if I may, I guess not to drag this out any longer, so to avoid, I guess, this coming back a few years from now for Lot 8, what would folks like to see in terms of releasing all 3? So you don't have to deal with this again in the future.
All right, so we're gonna hold on the vote for a moment, and I'll ask for comments in response to Mr. Norcross's question.
Well, this is Bob Wirtschafter. I mean, we won't do anything because nobody will need to come before us unless somebody is attempting to change something. And at which point we will deal with the changes. But I mean, right now, everybody has, and it's immaterial to current, what we're currently dealing with here. I think you came here asking for release of covenant 3. Let's just give you what you want and go home.
No, I understand that. I'm just, what happens is these things pop up in the title reviews when property's being transferred. And at some point along the line, the real estate bar, for whatever reason, at least in this area, decided, well, along with the covenant release, we also want to see a release of the statement of conditions. Whether that's really necessary or not, I don't know, but that's become industry standard. And I'm just saying, Bob, if we're here dealing with it and everyone seems satisfied enough, town staff is satisfied that they've done all 3, just to avoid this becoming an agenda item down the road when Lot 8 sells, if the board found that it could, just release all three now. You don't have to deal with it later on. That's all.
Right. And we've asked the question, what would the board need to, Warren Chain has spoken that he would be comfortable releasing the full statement of conditions. Other board members are not comfortable with that. So we are in the middle of a vote, and we've stalled the vote to ask this question in case we need to redo the motion. Is there something that the board can give voice to that would make the board comfortable with releasing the full statement of conditions?
Madam Chairman, can I suggest we finish the vote for the motion
Yeah.
that's there, and then that we have a second motion that
Yeah,
releases the rest of it?
yes, I think that's a very intelligent procedure. Thank you, Mr. Wirtschafter. All right, so I believe I was at Warren's vote. Is that correct? And then Tom Gagan vote. And right now our vote for the board to release condition number 3.
I
and
approve.
You approve. Okay, and Bob Wirtschafter
I approve.
and Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, I approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve the release of condition number 3. So Jamie, the board has approved the release of condition number 3. And now I will ask the board if we have any comments or suggestions about what the board would need to see in order to release all of the full statement of conditions in lieu of as-built plans. Any suggestions, Arthur?
Well, the challenge, of course, is the plan that was attached does not show any information associated with what this access is to Lot A. Usually, I mean, if I was looking for a sign off on this, and we're not necessarily looking for an as-built plan, and we would ask perhaps the DPW director, here's the plan, here's what was proposed, can you go out there and confirm this and verify it? That could suffice in replacement of an as-built plan, but I have no idea what from 1986 was actually submitted and what was the intent of those first 2 conditions. They're general, but I would expect that if there was a detailed plan, then the plan could support verification of it. And then an inspection by the DPW would be sufficient to do that, or a member of the planning board staff.
All right. Sounds good. Any other comments from board members about what we would need to feel comfortable release? Warren Chain?
Yeah, this is Warren Chain. If I understood prior comments, first, there was no absolute requirement for an as-built at the time. Staff has been on site, and to the best of their knowledge, the items involved in the other conditions have been met, have been done in accordance with the plan. And so I don't see in the future what additional information we would ever get other than what we already have, that it appears that what was planned was done and in accordance with the plan. So hence my feeling that the other conditions ought to be released. There's really no other information that we would expect later on. We're just waiting for some other problem to come up that we would have no further information on which to act. So that's it, my comment.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members about what we would need to feel confident in order to release to take the action to release the other 2 conditions? I think Arthur has suggested that an inspection by DPW director to compare with detailed plans, which we don't actually seem to have, and that would suffice in lieu of an as-built. And Warren is suggesting that staff has already been on site and that to the best of their knowledge, it does appear that things were done according to the conditions stated.
Madam Chair, Jamie Norcross again, just one additional comment. It seems like this might simplify things a bit. Condition number 2 is essentially an ongoing condition with regard to maintaining the stormwater runoff within the panhandle portion. So that doesn't specifically need to be released. Number 1 talks about prior to building construction on lot 8, a driveway shall be constructed of a dustless and durable material within the panhandle portion of lot 8. It would seem to be fairly, I would think, easy to determine if there was a dustless and durable material that was established. And I think town staff has said that. So I think you could, without any more information, really just release lot 1 and we'll leave, excuse me, condition 1, we'll just leave condition 2 as it is, as it's essentially an ongoing condition.
All right, good suggestion. Any other comments from board members? So the question for the board is, would you like to follow Mr. Norcross's suggestion and that we just take another vote based on Ally's visit? I understand it was Ally who visited the site, that we could release condition number 1.
Catherine, this is Art Spru.
Yes.
Your comment, if there was no other plans that were on file associated with this, then the suggestion seems appropriate at this point.
All right. I'm going to ask Ally, are there no other more detailed plans available for this site?
Catherine, after a review, I went through the entire file. I did not
Yes.
find any other plans.
Okay.
But granted, this was a while ago, but I did not find any other plans.
No, that's okay. Good. Just wanted to confirm. All right. So I'm going to ask then, if the board so chooses, can we have a motion now to release condition number 1 from the statement of conditions following Mr. Norcross's suggestion? We've already voted and approved to release number 3.
Catherine, what about condition number 2? Are we releasing all of the 3 conditions now? Or
Well,
no?
that was my initial suggestion, but Jamie suggested that we revise that
Okay.
and just not in, although to be honest with you, I personally don't agree with this course of action. But I'm asking the board. He suggested that we just leave condition number 2 as it is, since it's an ongoing condition, but in my mind, it's an ongoing condition that we need to know is being fulfilled. We do need to know that in order to release it. It's not just a non-issue because it's ongoing. It's most definitely an issue. So in fact, it's a major issue. As far as we're concerned, it's something that has to be done. So I would prefer to see that we somehow, we've released condition number 3. So for the matter at hand and for the property that is under consideration, the applicant is all set. But we are just exploring whether we can release the other 2 conditions so that it doesn't come back to us in the future for some reason. And I'm asking the board what you need to see in order to do that. And I think, Arthur, you suggested that we have Tom Temple inspect it. Ally's saying we don't have any more detailed plans than what's been given to the board. And so I think there's some diversity of opinion about what needs to be done here. My individual opinion, I would be in agreement with Arthur. I think we need just some verification that condition number 2 has been satisfied. And then perhaps we could vote to release both condition number 1 and number 2 at a future meeting. That's what I would suggest. Any other comments from the board? Yes, Warren.
This is Warren again. With respect to the stormwater runoff, it seems to me the activity disrupting the ground surface out there took place a long time ago. And if staff has been out there and sees absolutely no sign of stormwater runoff, would seem to me that's about all you would ever want to hope to find. It clearly is not an issue. If there were stormwater runoff, it certainly would be evident by virtue of that runoff taking place over an extended period of time. If there isn't, then there isn't. In the future, if stormwater becomes an issue, it certainly isn't going to be because of the construction that was done years and years and years ago. So I would be in favor releasing that condition along with the others, as again, time has proven that it's been satisfied.
Ally, I'm going to ask you, I mean, did we do a detailed study of this in storm events?
I did not do a detailed study in
Yeah.
storm events.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was to the best of my knowledge from
Yeah.
when the request was submitted to us
Yeah.
for release.
Okay. Yeah. So that's good. So, all right. So,
Well, Catherine, this starts
Yeah.
through again.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we're going to get any further advancement on this.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I'm not sure that there is any issues that would, in my observation, that would be inconsistent to what staff has reported. So for all practical purposes, I suggest right now we make a motion that we release, conditions 1 and 2 also.
All right. Great. So there's a motion before the board to release conditions 1 and 2 in addition. We've already released condition number 3. So do I have a second to that motion?
This is Warren Chain, I second.
Great. All right. So Art Spru,
Art Spru, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
Tom Gagan,
Tom Gagan, approve.
Bob Wirtschafter,
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
Roger Griffin,
Roger Griffin, approve.
and this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve that we go ahead and release the other 2 conditions, conditions number 1 and 2. So, Jamie, I think with the 2 votes, the board has given a full release to the statement of conditions.
Thank you very much, and I will try my best not to come back with one of these from 1980s anytime soon. So.
It's a little hard to backtrack that far.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So the next item on our agenda is the endorsement of plans for 776 Main Street and 70 Depot Road. This was the approval of the proposed 5-lot subdivision of land. And this comes back to us because the time limit has passed. And as you know, the board endorsed this, the board approved this subdivision, and the time limit has passed. And it is time that we sign the plans. And Ally, I'd just like to ask you to clarify for the board and the public why it's on our agenda.
Sure. We do put these endorsements on the agenda just to inform everyone that the required time limit where an applicant or a butter can file a lawsuit against it basically is up. And so we put it on the agenda for the planning board to sign. Obviously, we're in a virtual meeting right now, so we cannot sign. But we're hopeful that maybe, tomorrow or even Wednesday, if the board has time, they can come in and endorse the plans and the statement of conditions.
Great. Thank you very much, Ally. So that's really a point of information. And tomorrow or the next day, the board will, members will go in to sign the plans and also the statement of conditions. All right. Next item on our agenda is a site plan review. This is a pre-application. This is not the formal application. And this is for 251 Kroll Road. And this is for a proposed change of use from a health club to dry storage. Change of use, but it is also a new site plan. And again, this is a pre-application. And do I have someone presenting for this matter for 251 Kroll Road?
Yes, David Clark.
Dave Clark, go
Yes,
ahead, David.
Also on the line is Pat Semerad, who has the property under agreement, who is the proponent, and Bill Riley, attorney for Mr. Semerad, is also on the line. So what you see before you is a site plan for a new use on the property. It is a storage building that will not look like your standard storage building, in that Mr. Semrad has engaged an architect to come up with a building that's appropriate for the neighborhood. Given the size, this project, as it proceeds, will have to go to the Cape Cod Commission as a development of regional impact because it exceeds 10,000 square feet of gross floor area. The parking that we've designed meets the zoning bylaw as far as setback requirements and the number of spaces for the intended use. In fact, the entire project meets the dimensional requirements of the zoning bylaw. The actual use that is proposed requires a special use permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And when the project gets a little further along in the design, we will be submitting to them also. So this is a rough idea of what we'd like to do. A new driveway, obviously, off of Kroll Road. Will provide access and be happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. This is Catherine. So before we go through questions and comments, I'd just like to review some of the points that are brought out in the staff report. As mentioned, this Zoning Board of Appeals and also to Cape Cod Commission. We do have some comments from the Department of Public Works, and I'll read that comment. Thank you for forwarding the information. This site currently direct discharges stormwater to the abutting property, Dr. Cole's. This should be corrected as part of the site plan approval process, wherein the applicants are required to design and mitigate the drainage system within their own property limits to accommodate the 25, 50, and 100-year storm event. Please note, this has caused major flooding to the adjacent property in the past, as well as the recent 100-year storm events from approximately a month ago. It is visible during large rain events where the site has point discharge from their pavement area and surface runoff from the existing grading configuration, causing flooding of the abutter's rear yard. The town of Chatham has gone to great lengths to accommodate, collect our surface runoff from Kroll Road and adjacent properties from entering onto private property in this area with our newly installed drainage improvement project. It was noted during our recent 100-year storm events that the health club property still generates runoff, causing runoff issues to Dr. Cowell's property, and this needs to be rectified during the review process. Also, from the Central Permitting Coordinator, the proposed use will require a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the proposed structure will require review and approval by the Historic Business District Commission. From the Board of Health, I have reviewed the proposed plan for a storage building at this site. The current use of the property is a health club. The plan for a storage building will not add septic flow to the property. The proposed site plan does not indicate the location of the existing or proposed septic system. More detailed information will be required for further review. And from the Airport Commission, please note that 251 Kroll Road, in relation to the Chatham Municipal Airport, is beyond the runway protection zone, or RPZ, and is also not under the airport approach. I'm just going to review briefly, as all of you know, what our site plan review criteria. In offering comments to the applicant, please keep these in mind. This is what we will need to see satisfied in the formal site plan review application. And one is the adequacy and arrangement of vehicular traffic access and circulation. And again, I'm going to just summarize these. 2 is adequacy and arrangement of pedestrian traffic access and circulation. 3, location arrangement, appearance, and self-sufficiency of off-street parking. 4, location, size, design, and general site compatibility of building, lighting, and signs. 5, adequacy of stormwater and drainage facilities. 6, adequacy of water supply and sewage disposal. 7, adequacy, type, and arrangement of trees, shrubs, and other landscaping, constituting a visual and/or noise buffer between the applicants and adjoining lands, including the maximum retention of existing vegetation. Number 8, and in the case of an apartment complex or other multiple dwelling, adequacy of usable open space for play areas. This one does not apply to this particular proposal. Number 9, protection of adjacent or neighboring properties against noise, glare, unsightliness, or other objectionable features. Number 10, adequacy of fire lanes and other emergency zones and the provision of fire hydrants. Number 11, special attention to the adequacy of structures, roadways, and landscaping in areas with susceptibility to ponding, flooding, and/or erosion. And then there are some additional points in your staff report that I'm sure you've all reviewed of some things that we may wish to request. I'm going to highlight a few of them. One is an estimate of the cost of site improvements. One is location and dimensions of all existing and proposed buildings, including setback distances and square footage calculations for each use. Another is location and design of parking, including with more detail, surface materials, handicap spaces, and grading and drainage plan, location of refuge storage and disposal, drains and culverts, and also details on outdoor lighting facilities. Again, you have a full list on your staff report, and I'm just including a few more details on landscaping. And so with all that being said, let's go through with board comments and questions for Mr. Clark. And so we'll start with Art Sprue.
Thank you, Catherine. This is Art Sprue. I have a few questions first. I may or may not have this information. I'm uncertain about what kind of dry storage facility this is. Is it, if you could describe a little bit of the structure and where access goes to it? Is this for vehicles accessing into it? Is it just for people bringing things into? Appreciate if it's just a little bit more understanding of the building itself, because it will affect comments that I have.
Sure. So the building is not for storage of automobiles, so you will not be able to drive into this building, is my understanding. Mr. Semrad is on the line, but that is my understanding. So it'll be a traditional storage lockers, like you've seen on TV, and then there's a storage facility in South Chatham that is similar in nature as to how the use is, how the building will be used. So there will be a main entrance where the renters will come in and get access to their storage unit inside the building. We do show 3 loading zones on the plan, but it's my understanding that the units would not be accessible for large storage vehicles or transportation vehicles. So, like I said, it's my understanding that there'll be a central office or entranceway where renters would come in and proceed to their storage units.
Okay. That's helpful. A couple other things, is there going to be like a caretaker or operator who's going to be on site during a specific set of hours or something like that? And, you know, does the site, do you intended to have a security fence around it so that it's gated operation if it's unmanned? Just trying to understand the operation a little bit, because again, my comments will reflect your responses.
I don't believe that we're going to have a security fence. I could be wrong. And it is my understanding that there will be somebody, a staff member at the office during set hours, I believe, or on call.
All right, so that implies that access to this facility is going to be only at a certain set hours. It's not 24/7 operation. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, all right. Thanks a lot for that information. So I guess this is a rather large building, big footprint. It brings some challenges with it, along with the site itself. David, you've shown contours here on the preliminary plan that are a significant drop from the rear to the front. It goes from about 52 to the rear to all the way to about 15, 16 to the front. So that's a significant drop. Now, it looks like you're proposing retaining walls so that you can fit this structure in. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So a couple of things come to mind. I mean, the amount of elevation differential that's going to be on this, depending upon where you put the floor grade on this building, is going to be significant with these retaining walls. I just scaled what you have there, and it's about 900 linear feet of retaining wall. That's a lot of retaining wall, a lot of exposed wall. This is just a thought. It has to do with the building itself, which would relieve us from trying to deal with so much retaining wall on the site. I think to put that much retaining wall on the site is a challenge. You may or may not agree with that. If this is an operation where you're going to access into it and go into locked storage areas, and you're bringing an architect in, see if there is a stepped floor elevation that can be placed on this so that it gives you a little bit more flexibility of reducing retaining walls and reducing excavation. All these retaining walls and arrangement that you have could create significant excavation too, which again, these would be very challenging if we're taking a look at impacts to constructing of it, the abutters and everything, because you got residential on both sides. It's just something that you might want to consider as part of your steps that you're taking, especially when you bring an architect on board. I think you could significantly reduce the retaining wall, significantly reduce excavation if your architect comes up with a good arrangement with inside your building yourself. Keep the square footage like you have it if the square footage does go forward as you propose. I think the other areas, if you are going to be excavating this much material, are you going to be removing it from site? I'm assuming that that's the case. And if that's the case, then you should identify how much material that is, where it's going, what route you're going to be transporting it on the roadways. We as planning board like to see any kind of trucking being done on public ways and not private ways. So it's just a consideration as part of the overall construction activities in order to build a facility after you plan it and design it. Again, I'd be interested, Catherine, in the fire department's input on this. The footprint on this building is significant. There's several hundred feet of length along it to get access to the rear of it. might be challenging. You can't get access from the adjoining properties. The only other access would be from the cemetery property, and that's certainly not advisable or choice that we would like to have. So I'd be interested in what the fire department would be interested in doing. If you take a look at the existing health facility, it is pretty much accessible around 3 of the sides, majority of it, so that if there was a fire or emergency, that they could get access to it if they need be. So there might be some consideration that the fire department would be looking for on that. So I'd be looking for what the fire department has to say about that. Certainly you brought up, Catherine, with one of the identifiers from staff of the stormwater. If there is going to be as much hard surface as being proposed here, I think it's the impervious area is increasing by 50%. Of course, stormwater management would be an important item to be assessing as part of your work. David, you're pretty good at your evaluations, assessment of stormwater management, so I believe that you'll be coming back with a good plan. I think there was a comment about impacts to the adjacent property, that's 259 Crowell Road. May need more retaining walls along that front edge there, depending on your elevations that you're using for your grading. So to prevent runoff from coming from the property. It's, again, not desirable to add all these retaining walls. They are expensive. $30 a square foot plus, that's a lot of money that you're dealing with there. Let's see what other things I had in here. Oh, yes, we got residential on both sides here. So I think our site plan criteria calls for buffering on that. So some sort of landscaping needs to be addressed associated with that. That should be part of your detailed plans. And I think the last comment that you had, the staff's comment was decide whether to schedule a site visit of the property or require a public hearing. And I suggest that we do both.
Yeah, good.
All right, that's what I have right now. Again, I understand this is preliminary and there's could be significant changes between now and the final, but those are some thoughts I have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Arthur. All good points. This is Catherine. I'll just pipe in. I do agree. I think we should schedule both a site visit and a public hearing on this particular matter. But let's continue with board questions, comments. Warren, would you like to go ahead?
Certainly, this is Warren Chain. I appreciate the information already provided. It helped reduce the issues and questions that I had significantly. And I pretty much support everything that Art had to say. I did hear, however, there's not planning to be a security fence around this, and given the nature of the facility, it does seem to me that special care needs to be taken with respect to the security systems, especially the security lighting that's likely to be appropriate on 4 sides of this building, given that you have residential housing on 2 sides, plus really Dr. Cole's office downhill from it as well. It does seem to me that the plan that we're seeing in front of us right now doesn't correctly reflect the house that is, or the houses, which are to the north. The house that is there, the swimming pool, is only about 15 feet from the property line, and I expect the proposed warehouse is 15 feet up a steep hill, but still that only puts 30 feet between the swimming pool and the building, and the buffer would be a challenge given there's a retaining wall there, and the height of this building, while unknown at the moment, is probably 30 feet. So that would probably make the top of the roof line, 40 feet above the swimming pool. So it would seem to be looming over the residents to the north, as well as really to the south. So sensitivity to that, I think, would be appropriate to try and consider. I too was concerned about the fire department's view here. in terms of getting, a large vehicle in there. It occurred to me that, given the retaining walls and so on, that you might even need to go in there with a ladder truck that could go up over the top of this building. And dealing with a ladder truck up in there is perhaps a challenge, certainly a turnaround area. It's not clear how much of the parking area would be used at any one time. I assume that I don't know how many storage lockers or units there would be in there, but with 35,000 square feet, there could be hundreds, I assume. And so at any time a fire truck needed to get in there, there's very likely to be a significant number of cars going or parked there. The comment about landscaping, I think, ought to be carefully considered here in terms of buffering in particular, but also with respect to trying to take the curse off the retaining wall. Drainage, everyone knows that the issues they've had in Dr. Cole's backyard there, front yard, the coverage of the lot here without really knowing what the grading will look like, but a significant increase in impervious coverage certainly suggests that there'll be a lot more water running down to that needs to be dealt with. And how that gets dealt with in amount of lot that doesn't have
Isn't that interesting?
I think something that needs to be carefully presented such that the board can feel comfortable that it is being adequately addressed when it comes forward. The adequacy of the parking was a question that came up only because of the number of units that are likely to be in there. I don't know if it's really short-term storage. In other words, you're going to have small businessmen going there 2 or 3 times a day to get things, or whether it's people that are going to put things away and come back, years later. But it does seem to me that the traditional number of parking spaces per square foot may need to be reviewed with respect to the likely traffic flow in and out of here, because the number of parking spaces is certainly not large, and there does need to be some space for cars to turn around and or pickup trucks, small vans, and so on. So I would encourage careful consideration to the parking that is deemed appropriate and with turnaround space, and again, getting back to what the fire department would have to say. But those are my comments for now.
Thank you, Warren. Tom Gagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom Gagan. David?
Yes,
David Clark.
I'm here.
Hi, David. David, I assume that the interior of this building is going to be multi-floored?
Two floors. Yes.
2 floors. Will there be any outside storage, either of containers or vehicles?
We're not showing it, and I don't think there's any room for it, given the number of parking spaces the bylaw requires and the access that we show now.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is I've been involved with multiple self-storage units in other towns. There is the ability to put a trailer of sorts enclosed for storage, usually for vehicles. It's quite profitable. But having said that, there'll be multiple stories inside. One of the issues that comes up with self-storage units is the control of what goes into the units. And what I would have a concern about is in terms of the security with the interior of the building, and how does the owner of the property protect themselves from the possible liability. It's a great place to literally dump things you don't want to have to pay to get rid of. So just a thought in the future that I'd like to know more about the security in terms of controlling a rather large facility over in Waltham, Mass. I dealt with, and also in other towns where people would store things and just abandon them because the cost, as I said before, of processing them was rather expensive. The building itself is going to be a new building, I'm assuming,
Yes.
and you're going to have to completely raise the old building. So my general concern is kind of the size of the building and the interior, how the interior is laid out. And if the applicant is in the business of self-storage, they would be able to do that on multiple floors. Those are my comments. Security for the interior storage, what comes in, and some way to define the ability to know what's being stored in the individual units.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom. Before I go on to Bob Wirtschafter, I did see Ally's hand raised. Did you want to go ahead, Ally?
Yes, I just wanted to make a quick comment. It is 5:30 and the community input session is scheduled for 5:30. So I just wanted to tell everyone that is here currently for the community input session that we were just finishing up very quickly this last application, and we will then move directly on to the community input session. So you are in the right spot. Don't leave. We'll be right with you.
Great. Thanks, Ally. Thanks so much. Okay, Bob Wirtschafter, comments, questions.
Sure.
And weigh in, please, too, on whether you think a site visit and/or public hearing is
Sure.
advisable.
Sure,
Great.
I will do that first. I think they're both advisable.
Great.
And my only concern with what I'm looking at now that hasn't been mentioned is the fact that when I drive in there with my trailer, I'm never going to get it out. You're going to have me stuck in there forever because I don't see how I can, turn around. So you would have to back out, something that I don't do with a trailer. And a lot of people bring trailers to storage facilities because they're bringing more than their car can hold. I'm also concerned that when they park that trailer, I don't know that you have enough room for a car and a trailer extending out. I think at that point, the fire truck can't get by them at all. And so I really don't think you've accommodated the kinds of traffic that these storage facilities get, which is not just vans and cars, but 24-foot trucks and cars with trailers. And so I would think that for us to be able to approve this, there has to be a much better traffic flow and storage and drop off points, and not just storage that you park your car and then you wheel it across the driveway to get into the facility, because that just doesn't seem like you're going to have a lot of people that are going to be happy coming to your facility with their stuff. So that's my concern. It's pretty tight. I'm not sure that you can build the building that's quite as wide as you've got it and accommodate the need to turn around.
Great. Okay, thank you, Bob. Roger Griffin, questions, comments for the applicant?
Yeah,
Please
it's
weigh
late,
in
and
on.
I think
Yeah,
it's
go
late,
ahead.
and everyone's made enough comments, and I think we have the site plan. I think the site plan obviously is common sense. I think we know what we expect. I guess what I'd be concerned with, I feel that definitely a site visit and a public hearing is necessary. I feel some of the questions we're bringing up is because we really don't know more about what type of storage facility. I think it's going to be very helpful. I'm assuming this could be something, could be a 12 by 24 type of unit, maybe knowing what's prohibited to be stored or maybe what's allowed to be stored. I think we need to know more about the facility itself, which will probably negate some of the questions we have, hopefully. I find it might be the building looks like it might be kind of imposing in the middle of a neighborhood. And I think something visual would be helpful. You know, it's like everything else. I mean, a site plan, we're asking, a site plan is obviously, it's common sense. I think that's what we need to see. Hopefully we're going to get to know a lot more. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Roger. So this is Catherine. I realize it's getting late, but I do have a few comments. I want to follow up on Arthur's questions about the type of storage, just so I'm clear about what the idea of this building is. Because you have storage where it's like you walk into the building, they're going to park and they're going to unload from their van or their trailer, and they're going to carry boxes up to a second floor unit that they have a key to? Or is it going to be the type of building where there's actually bays and you can sort of open up it's sort of like a garage door where you open up the bay and you have more direct access to your storage unit from your car or your trailer or your van? So David, can you answer that?
Yeah, there won't be garage doors on the outside.
So you can have
So
stuff in.
So yes, yeah,
Okay.
and that's the purpose of the 3 loading zones. So you can pull a vehicle with a trailer up and park in that area, and there's ample room to back the trailer up.
Okay. Okay, great. So I think with that being said, there's been a lot of comments made. I do agree with the previous comments. If I may say so, I think there is some significant redesign that needs to be done for this particular site plan regarding adequacy of access, emergency vehicle access, all the things that have been brought up, even just for the vehicles that will be taking things into storage. I think that was an excellent point that Bob Wirtschafter brought up. I don't think you have sufficient turnaround room for any of those situations, either fire department or, even the people accessing storage. I also think we need to look at the situation regarding lot coverage. There's a significant increase in the coverage, significant increase in pervious lot coverage. There is, may I say, there is a significant increase in impact, in intensity of impact on this site. And I think I would like to see that reduced. I think it's too much. And I do think you need, even just for the site to function, you need to have better access and turnarounds and et cetera. And so you might need to consider making the building smaller, making the paved area smaller, with better access all around and turnarounds added. I do think we need more information about the details of the access, more information on lighting. I think you need to pay attention about the comments that have been made about buffers to the residential properties nearby. And let's see, to the stormwater issues. And also, we've mentioned landscaping, but I just want to make note that there does, comparing this to the aerial view of the current conditions on the site, it does look like there will be a significant number of trees that will need to be cleared for this. And we do need to see, I would prefer that that would be lessened. I'd also, but at the very least, we do need to see the details of what trees are to be cleared and what trees you'll be replacing and landscaping that you'll be putting in to act as buffers and to replace the trees that you're going to be removing to add all the parking spaces. So I also agree with my colleagues that we do need to have a site visit and a public hearing. Those are my comments. And with that, I think what we can do, the board would need to vote now.
Madam
And
Chair,
yes, who is this?
this is Bill Riley. I represent Pat Semrad.
All right, please go
Along with
ahead.
David
Mr.
Clark. Very, very, very briefly, I just want to remind the members that this is a commercial zone, a general business zone, zone
Yep.
GB3, and the the protections for residential properties that is built into the site plan review has to do with when we butt up against a residential district, so that people who build single-family residences in a GB zone don't have the same level of protection. That being said, clearly we're going to do some buffer thing. I just wanted to raise that point. Also, there was a lot of concern about fire department, and a building of this size is clearly going to be sprinkled, which I think reduces a lot of the concerns the fire department has, and what Mr. Simrad is planning is that this would be sort of the beginning of a company that would have multiple sites like this that would be organized and run from the town of Chatham, and and so so it's not a typical self-storage where you drive in and dump whatever you want. As Tom, and I can understand, I think Tom's concern is very legitimate, but this is going to be one where you have to go into the building. There'll be staff on site to make sure that that inappropriate materials can't be stored there. So I understand it's late, and I appreciate you giving me a moment. So thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Riley. Those were good clarifications, and I do appreciate clarifications. Thank you. So I think if the board is ready, what our vote would be to accept this pre-application with all the comments and that the board has given. Please remember, this is simply a pre-application. I did hear from the board. I think generally there is a consensus that we do want to have both a site visit and a public hearing. And I'm just going to double check with Ali. Can we do all this all as one vote to accept the pre-application and to have a site visit and a public hearing, or do we need to do separate votes?
Nope, you can have it all as one.
Okay, so that's what I'm going to propose, that we have a motion that we accept the pre-application and that we have a site visit and a public hearing. Do I have a motion to that effect?
Art Sprue, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Arthur. May I have a second to that motion?
Warren Chain, I second.
Thank you. So let's do our roll call vote. Art Sprue.
Art Sprue, approve.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, approve.
Tom Gagan.
Tom Gagan, approve.
Bob Wirtschafter. Bob Wirtschafter?
Bob Wirtschafter approve, sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay. Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I approve that we accept this pre-application and that we organize a site visit and also a public hearing for this for the formal application. All right, great. So let's go to our next item on the agenda, and we are past the time. It's 5:45, but this is our community input session. Again, I'm just going to ask anyone who's not speaking, would you kindly mute your microphones and disable your video, except for planning board members who should keep their videos on. And we'll move into our community input session, and this is regarding the West Chatham Neighborhood Center draft zoning bylaw amendment. And I just want to review for everyone a little bit of the history of what's going on here. Back in 2003, the comprehensive plan for the town of Chatham was unanimously approved at annual town meeting by 2/3 vote, actually by unanimous vote, I'm sorry, by the citizens of Chatham. And since that comprehensive plan was approved, it has been one of the tasks, one of the mandates given to the planning board to implement certain aspects of that comprehensive plan. And so there's been a number of attempts to do that, but most recently, I want to mention that in 2013 and 2014, the Board of Selectmen asked the Cape Cod Commission to do a visioning study of the Route 28 corridor and to make recommendations to the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen about what needed to be done in terms of changing our bylaws in order to implement the comprehensive plan in that study area. So again, this was the most recent efforts for the Planning Board to take on our mandate of implementing the comprehensive plan. So that visioning study was done in 2013 and 2014. The final draft was submitted to the board and the Board of Selectmen in 2014. After that point, the Planning Board sifted through some of the recommendations. We determined priorities, and then we began to work on drafting zoning bylaw amendments that would work to implement the recommendations of the Cape Cod Commission from their visioning study of the Route 28 corridor. And in annual town meeting of 2016, there were a number of these recommendations that were drafted into proposed zoning bylaw amendments by the Planning Board that were passed at annual town meeting. I'm doing a very, very brief summary for you. And those were in regards to the South Chatham Neighborhood Center and also in regards to changing the zoning in the areas along Route 28 that fall in between the neighborhood centers, changing those from small business zoning to residential zoning. So that was passed at annual town meeting 2016, and also the new zoning for the South Chatham Neighborhood Center was passed at annual town meeting 2016, as well as the bylaw amendment that determined the boundaries for the South Chatham Neighborhood Center. So that was all done. And to continue with that work, the next effort of the board was to continue to draft zoning bylaw amendments, proposed zoning bylaw amendments for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, for the Cornfield Neighborhood Center, and for the Kroll Road Neighborhood Center. So we kind of left off that in 2016 and had to get involved with other long-range planning issues such as the floodplain and the accessory dwelling unit bylaw amendment. Then last year in 2019, I'm sorry, actually in 2019, we basically picked up where we left off in terms of continuing to work on the draft for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center zoning, and continued that prior to COVID in 2019, and then also during 2020. For a while, we had to not work on long-range planning according to the COVID, certain protocols that we had to follow during COVID of only doing necessary regulatory business. But then we've been able, I'm sorry, if I could ask everyone to mute their microphones and disable their videos. We're getting some feedback. So then again, in 2020, we were able to, towards the end of the year, again, pick up our efforts to continue with the draft of the West Chatham neighborhood zoning. We did enlist the help again of Cape Cod Commission to work on this new draft zoning and also to integrate the use of form-based code. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ally to continue with our discussion to give you an idea where we're starting from with this.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I'm just going to pick up where Catherine left off. A lot of you that are actually on the meeting tonight, I think you did attend our 2020 West Chatham Neighborhood Center Community Forum and did take the visual preference survey. But we did that in 2020, and that was to hear from the community what kind of building forms and features they found were desirable in the West Chatham Neighborhood Center. And after that meeting from 2020 to 2021, the Cape Cod Commission worked with the Planning Board to create this current draft that we're hoping to gain input from the community tonight on. In 2021, the planning board took this draft and we wanted to hear input from different boards and committees. So we took it to the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Historic Business District Commission to hear input from those two boards, because we felt that that was very important as we're working through this wording, as we're working through the draft concepts. We really wanted to hear from them. And then in 2021, it was a consensus of the planning board that the runway protection zone should be drafted as an overlay district by the Airport Commission with input from the airport consultant, town council, and town staff. We felt that this was very important because the runway is on two sections, two areas in town. It's not just in the neighborhood, West Chatham Neighborhood Center. It also is on the other side of the runway. So to have an overlay zone for that, we think is very important to encompass both of those sections. And also, the overlay district would supersede any of the underlying zoning districts. So whether it be this proposed zoning that we are going to run through tonight, an overlay district would supersede that zoning, or the current underlying zoning district now that exists currently, this overlay zone would supersede any of that. So the planning board, it was consensus that the runway protection zone should be drafted as an overlay. So Chloe, if you could move on to the next slide, please. So our next steps. So we want to hear from you. That's why you're here tonight. We want to hear, this is a listening session. The planning board wants to hear any and all comments you have on the draft. Again, this is the draft. We, as always, we look for community input. We think it's extremely important for the board to hear community input so we can make it the best bylaw that we can. That's the purpose of tonight for a listening session. So the planning board will review all of the comments that we received tonight and via email at a subsequent meeting to determine what changes we should make to the draft zoning. So these comments on this draft tonight, we obviously know that you're going to listen to our presentation, and if you think about something later on that you don't have tonight, or if someone couldn't make it to the meeting tonight, we want to be able to accept these comments, and we're leaving it open until January 1st to hear any comments back before the board reviews all their comments in the entirety to potentially make changes to the draft. And I believe at the end of this PowerPoint presentation is my email address. Any of these comments can be emailed to me, and they will be forwarded to the board and reviewed at a different meeting. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chloe Schaefer from the Cape Cod Commission.
Great, thank you, Allie. Good evening, everyone. As Allie mentioned, my name is Chloe Schaefer. I'm with the Cape Cod Commission, and I'm here with several of my colleagues. And we have been providing technical assistance to the town in drafting this draft zoning bylaw, which I will now provide a high-level summary of. So first to begin is the purpose of the draft zoning, and this is multifaceted. It includes several elements, including implementing the goals of the comprehensive plan, creating a stronger connection between community vision and regulations. But a few that I want to draw your attention to here are bolded and italicized. Those are preserving and enhancing the existing character of the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, promoting multimodal and especially pedestrian-friendly design and development, and allowing more diverse housing types attainable to residents of all income levels. And just wanted to point those out because some of the newer concepts that are incorporated in this draft zoning are really meant to help achieve those purposes. So first to begin with are the boundaries. This is the area we're currently talking about. These draft boundaries encompass parcels from just west of George Ryder Road to just east of Barn Hill Road along Route 28. And these are parcels that are currently zoned GB3. Did want to note that as we were presenting the draft zoning to other town boards, it was brought up by some members of those boards as well as some public comment that it might be worth re-examining the boundaries here to possibly include some additional parcels, potentially some on the northern side of Route 28. That's something we'd certainly love some further community input on. Next, just in terms of the review framework, the current draft zoning does follow the existing development review framework, and any requirements regarding going to the HBDC or the Zoning Board of Appeals would remain as they are today. Additionally, certainly zoning, potential changes in zoning may produce non-conforming properties, but as always, those would be allowed to continue as is, and there are some specific provisions within the zoning allowing them to change. Next, the West Chatham Neighborhood Center draft zoning does break the area into 3 different zones. The first being Zone A1, and that's those that area within 100 feet of the Route 28 right-of-way for those lots with frontage on Route 28. Zone A2 is the area beyond 100 feet of the Route 28 right-of-way for those lots with frontage on Route 28, kind of that teal color there. And then those lots that do not have frontage on Route 28 are shown in navy, and that is Zone B. And the reason for splitting this up into these zones is to provide, there are some standards and regulations in the draft zoning that are really focused along Zone A1 to really provide a more active and pedestrian-friendly streetscape along Route 28 in this neighborhood center. Next are the lot standards. And the lot standards remain unchanged from the current zoning. This relates to the minimum lot size, minimum lot frontage, as well as maximum lot coverage. However, there are significant changes in the draft zoning with regards to setbacks compared to the existing zoning. And this is for the Zone A1 setbacks. There's a minimum road setback of 10 feet here, as well as a maximum road setback of 20 feet for a primary building. And the parking also has to be located at least 10 feet behind the primary building facade. And the intention of these setbacks is really to help bring buildings closer to the roadway and move the parking kind of further back so it's not as much of a, doesn't have as much of a visual impact on the roadway to really help create that more engaging streetscape that can encourage greater pedestrian activity. In Zone A2, and again, this is those areas beyond 100 feet of Route 28 for those parcels that front it. There's a minimum setback of 10 feet, but there isn't a maximum setback here, understanding that in many cases, these buildings will be located already farther back from the roadway, or their visual impact may be buffered by those buildings in the Zone A1. However, the parking setback is 30 feet, which is a bit deeper than the existing zoning, and that can allow for a deeper buffer to help minimize that visual impact as well, should it be located near a roadway. And then in terms of the Zone B setbacks, these also have a minimum setback of 10 feet, again, bringing those buildings closer to the roadway, but there is a little bit more flexibility with a maximum road setback for the primary building of 30 feet. But also here still the parking does need to be located at least 10 feet behind the primary building facade, again, to really help create that pedestrian-friendly streetscape. The draft zoning also incorporates several new building form standards. So one of these is building height. This is in the current zoning, but in the draft zoning, it is currently allows up to 2 stories, not to exceed 30 feet, though there is the potential for 2.5 stories to be allowed if the development provides affordable housing units. For reference, currently 2.5 stories, not to exceed 30 feet is what the GB3 allows. But some of these other building form standards are relatively new concepts, but they're really meant to help provide zoning that is more consistent with the design goals of the Historic Business District Commission and help align the two. And they did provide some initial feedback on these building standards as well. Just digging into some of those a little bit. First here is looking at the maximum facade width for the street facing portion of a building. And this currently in the draft zoning allows a total facade width of up to 75 feet, though a single primary facade could only be up to 50 feet. And this is to help keep buildings within the pedestrian scale along the street front. The planning board has expressed some concerns that 75 feet might actually be too wide. But we did want to note that when presenting this to the Historic Business District Commission, they noted that perhaps what's less important is the total width of the building and more so the width of a single wall or a single facade, and that they've seen successful longer buildings that have been broken up into several smaller components. And just to kind of help put these numbers into context, here's some examples of buildings in or near the area and their facade widths. These two both exceed the 75 feet, but do have some separate components that make them up. They're broken up somewhat. And then these are a couple of buildings that are less than 75 feet as well. Another new concept in this draft zoning is a maximum building footprint. This is per building. Multiple buildings are allowed in the zones and on the lots, but the smallest is in that A1 zone, again with the smaller character, helping to contribute to a more pedestrian scale and pedestrian friendly environment along Route 28 at 3,000 square feet maximum. Zone B is 4,000 square feet. And then zone A2, again, that portion behind zone A1 is the largest at 5,000 square feet, understanding that the visual impacts of those larger buildings would likely be minimized by the buildings in the zone A1 district. And originally, in one of the earlier versions of the draft zoning, the zone A2 building footprint maximum was actually set at 7,000 square feet, though the planning board felt that was too large, and so it was reduced. And just a couple of examples of maximum building footprints existing in the area. This top one is approximately 6,300 square feet, and the bottom one is approximately 9,200 square feet. So these are actually larger building footprints than what was shown before, but to help get a little bit of a sense of scale. Also, these are kind of help show how, depending on orientation to the roadway, a building may feel smaller or larger. And then just to provide kind of a visual example, this is just illustrative here, but of some of those core differences in terms of the setbacks between the current zoning and the draft proposed zoning. Currently, the GB3 zoning does have relatively deep setbacks for buildings, and the parking is actually shallower. So what can often happen is parking will wind up in front of the buildings along the street. Whereas the draft proposed zoning, the setbacks in site and building standards are really working to help bring some of those buildings closer to the roadway and minimize the visual impact of parking along the street to really help create that more active and engaged streetscape. The draft zoning does include, of course, specific parking requirements and access standards. And one thing I wanted to point out that's new here is not only are there minimum parking requirements, but there are also maximum parking requirements. And this is kind of best practices in terms of parking management these days to really encourage efficient use of land. And the maximum parking requirements here generally align with what is currently a minimum, the minimum in the area, and the minimum is reduced. And this is because of the opportunity for creating more of a mix of uses in this area, creating kind of more of a concentration opportunities for shared parking and more opportunities for walkability. And then here we have the uses that have been called out as permitted in the West Chatham Neighborhood Center in the draft zoning. And these uses really focus around those types of uses that would be in an active neighborhood center, and typically align with many of the uses currently allowed today in the GB3 zoning. Did want to highlight two here. One is mixed use development, which is a slightly new category here to encourage that mix of commercial and residential uses in an area, and then calling out that multifamily dwellings are allowed in the A2 and B zones by special permit, again, to hopefully allow for more housing options. And uses not noted here, but similar may also be permitted. And just a couple of other notes on some issues the planning board is is thinking about in terms of uses. One is potentially prohibiting motel, hotel, and inn uses as well as tourist homes. And then also looking at whether to define a specific mix of commercial and residential space in the area. The draft zoning also includes maximum density of possibly 8 dwelling units per acre, with the potential for up to 12 dwelling units if affordable housing is provided. And these are just a couple of illustrations from actually a different project that we worked on with some towns in the region. But here, just wanted to put them up to really help provide an illustration of some ways that some denser development can be incorporated into forms that are complementary or enhance the Cape's character. And so lastly, just kind of wanted to go back to some of those key goals that the draft zoning is really attempting to help with. That's enhancing and preserving the community character, promoting pedestrian activity, and those two especially coming to light with those different setbacks, different building form and site standards, and then of course allowing for more housing opportunities and types through potentially greater density as well as different uses. So certainly we're looking forward to hearing your feedback on all aspects of the draft zoning, but there were a few just wanted to highlight. Certainly would love to hear any thoughts you have on the boundaries, potential facade width maximum, building footprint maximum, as well as uses, the density and defining a mix of commercial and residential. And again, as Ali noted earlier, certainly love to hear comments this evening, but understand this was a lot of information to take in, and should you need more time to digest, certainly please send emails her way. So with that, I will hand it back to Catherine.
Thank you so much, Chloe. That was as always, a very clear presentation. And again, I just want to say how much we appreciate working with you to help produce this draft for a proposed bylaw amendment for zoning in the West Chatham Neighborhood Center. And I'd just like to remind everyone, I think Ali mentioned it and Chloe mentioned it, that this is very much a work in progress. This is a draft. The planning board has actually chosen to leave a lot of issues open, not making any final determination because we want to hear from you. This is a community input session. It's basically a listening session for us, and we want to hear from you, hear your responses to the draft. And again, as mentioned, if there's not time tonight to give all of the input, we are accepting written input through January 1st, and we gave Ali Sabatino's email address. You can send it to her at Community Development Department. But with that, I'm just going to see if we have anyone in the audience who would like to make some comments or offer some input on this draft for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center as it is proposed. And just remember, it's a work in progress. I don't see any hands raised. I do see, is that Ms. Gibbs? Elaine Gibbs, is your hand raised?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question right now. I'm going to have comments later. But reference that there would be upwards of 8 to 12 units per acre. Can you just tell me how many acres are in this district?
Oh gosh, I asked Chloe and Ali if we know offhand. I don't have that off the top of my head. I'm sorry, Elaine. Ali, do we happen to know in the district with the boundaries as proposed? I mean, there may be a consideration of changing the boundaries and adding more properties on the north side or the east. But as it is now, do we have an idea of the total number of acres?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but if you give me a second, I could try to take a look. Chloe might have it though, so she might be able to answer quicker than I can.
Thank you.
Chloe?
I can probably get you that if you just give me about 30 seconds. I should have a rough number for you.
Thank you, Chloe.
I believe it's approximately 24 acres, 23 and a half. Allie, does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I'm just sorry. I'm also searching as we're doing this. But that does sound about right.
All right, you want to go ahead, Elaine, with that in mind?
Well, I haven't done the math yet, but if you're saying anywhere from 8 to 12 units per acre, and they would be, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments on 24 acres, I'll have to get back to you after doing the math as to how many bedrooms that could be.
All right.
Okay, so
All right.
I will get back to you. Thank you.
May I raise another speaker and then we can call on you again? So I do see Mr. Buckley's hand is raised. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. So just as a little background, I was on the Long Range Planning Committee, and that was passed by town meeting in 2003. And I just wanted to put it into context. It was passed unanimously, but and we always tried in that the chair has passed, so he can't enlighten us, but we always tried to make it so it would pass at town meeting. So whenever we came up with language, I would always hold back because, like, well, it'll pass at town meeting. So sometimes when you make things, I just wanted, when you make things easy to swallow or fuzzy, it's easier to pass at town meeting, especially if town meeting is late and they're like, yeah, whatever, let's go home. So I'm just putting it in perspective. A lot of people pull out the long range plan and quote it as if it's the Bible, and that everybody had studiously read every sentence of it. So I just wanted to put that in perspective. The other part is that as far as the process goes now, it would be good to know if there's a deadline for comments of January 1st, that perhaps, I don't know what happens after that. It could be, you said it's the beginning of a process, but it's kind of like, well, is there going to be like another draft put out so that we can look at that? Or is that going to be the end draft, like, and we're done, kind of thing. So it's not quite clear if, if people don't feel they have to, especially over the holidays, spend a lot of time writing and unloading all their thoughts, they could at least see how it's being molded and how it's evolving. So if anything, the chair could say that would let them know that they don't feel guilty for not saying something. There'll be another draft. It won't be the last chance. And my question there, I guess, is I would wonder if my family is involved in selling some land to the town. We haven't settled yet, but it's 2.5 acres and it's just outside the eastern boundary there. So I'm wondering, I guess, I would hope that, yes, it would be rezoned. So if I would suggest, yes, that the boundary be extended beyond the hedge to include those 2.5 acres. So yes, it'll be more than 5 single-family homes. I would hope it'd be much more than that. And I used to live in townhouse development when we were young married, so it works. It's very nice, and it can be done well. So I just wanted to point that out for people who are hung up about middle, and I would call it middle housing. That might be the way to put it, not apartment buildings. So thank you.
Okay, great. So I will just respond briefly to Mr. Buckley's questions, to your 2 questions. One, just to clarify that yes, we wanted to open up the consideration to change the boundaries of the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, because it's come up from a couple of places, to include some properties to the north and possibly to the east. But just to clarify for everybody, that actually would be a separate draft zoning bylaw amendment. The boundaries would be done as a separate action, as a separate zoning bylaw amendment. And then to address your question about the process, yes, there would be another draft proposed. What we would do is gather together all of the comments that have come from the public, the comments we've received from the other boards, and then the planning board. Ally's great at putting all those together in a summary, and the planning board would look at that summary, and we'd have, maybe a couple of meetings where we'd review it carefully and think together about how to integrate that input and some of the issues that we've deliberately left open because we wanted to hear input, maybe we would specify those and come up with another draft. Whether or not, in general, there is an issue of timing, because if we want to aim to bring this to annual town meeting of 2021, which is an open question at this point, we want to see if things are developed enough to do that. But then we do have to create a final version of the draft and send that to Board of Selectmen. Then we have to hold a public hearing on it. So there's a couple of more opportunities definitely for more public input. And just a reminder that it can be revised even at the public hearing stage. So yes, to answer your question, Mr. Buckley, another draft will be produced that would be integrating all the input that we receive from the public and the other boards, and more chances in the future for revisions. That's part of the process. So do I have any other hands raised? Ms. Gibbs, have you come back with your comments? I do see David. If you don't, Elaine, could I recognize this other speaker and then come back to you if you don't mind?
That's fine.
Yeah, I see David has his hand raised.
Hi. Am I on?
All right. Yes.
Okay.
And can you give us your full name, please?
David Bixby.
Hello, Mr. Bixby.
I have basically two issues. The second one is the airport. I'll skip that for now, but there's an area just south of the where the post office is, and kind of south of the post office and north on Monomoy. There's a loop back in there that comes off of Sequoia and goes into there's a residential loop. There's an area there. It's kind of a ravine. I don't know if it used to be a bog, if it's an overgrown bog, but it's a natural habitat for box turtles, and there's a lot of wildlife in there. I'm a little bit concerned. I don't know who owns that piece of land. I don't know if it's conservation land. I don't have any idea, but it is as we develop more and more and more of Chatham, I get more and more concerned with incursions into natural habitat. This is an area that I think should be protected, and I would be concerned that I don't know where the boundaries of the West Chatham neighborhood are on that south side of the post office. I'm just concerned that those areas, I would not want to see development of any kind go encroach on that habitat area. I don't know if that's been given any consideration. I don't know if the Conservation Commission weighs in on that, but that's something I would be concerned about. I don't know if somebody wants to address that now or not.
This is Catherine. We can double check on that and look at where the boundaries are. My sense of things, just to reply offhand, is that the area you're discussing is outside of the boundaries of the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, but we'll definitely take a look at that. and define it more clearly. And as I mentioned, all these comments we're going to keep on record, and we're going to look at them, all together when we review everything. So, but that's my initial response. So let's go now to Elaine. Mr. Bixby, if you're done for the moment.
I said I had 2 points. I just briefly, if you don't mind, mention the other one.
No, go ahead.
I guess I'll call it the elephant in the room. It's the airport. We have an airport just north of the West Chatham Neighborhood Center. That's, you've got 2 incompatible land uses there. You have a people concentrated neighborhood center, and then you have an airport that has a runway protection zone, and West Chatham neighborhood is going to be right in the center of the flight path. So I find it a little bit disturbing that we have an airport master plan with a 20-year horizon and no mention of West Chatham. We have a West Chatham neighborhood center plan, long-term plan with really no mention of the airport. Maybe an overlay is a solution here, but I find it kind of concerning that to me, it's just kind of an afterthought. I would think these studies should have been integrated, and I just don't see how we can have a neighborhood center on the one hand and an airport that wants to grow itself, maybe not physically, but certainly operations wise, with bigger and bigger planes coming into that airport. These uses are fundamentally incompatible, and I just can't see how you can talk about the West Chatham without talking about the airport, and how you can't coordinate these 2 studies. I think we're a long way from making decisions on West Chatham without addressing the issue of the airport. That's my comment on that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. B. Thank you. This is Catherine. I will just comment just very briefly. As Ali mentioned, and as Mr. Bixby mentioned, the considerations of zoning for the runway protection zone will be considered again as a separate action, as a zoning overlay district that will be in consideration of both ends of the runway, runway 6, and I think, is it runway 24? So both sides, which currently is zoned residential on the one end and GB3 on the other end. And so that will be considered as a separate action. And just so everyone knows, we will be scheduling another meeting in the future to consider the issues with regards to the zoning of the runway protection zone. That will be considered in the future, so that will be under discussion in the near future. But it is a separate action, and so for that reason, just for the sake of clarity moving forward, we'll be covering that in a separate meeting. So now I do have a number of hands up, and I think Elaine Gibbs, if you are still have your hand up, let's come back to you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think several meetings ago, I mentioned that I thought the setbacks of a minimum of 10 feet and a maximum of 20 feet from the road was too close. First of all, there's no room for businesses or restaurants to have outdoor dining or whatever. But more importantly, the visibility coming in and out of these various areas would be blocked by the buildings. And I guess I'm concerned about the question when I asked the acreage, that this entire study is based on increasing density for housing for the most part, and nobody knew how many acres there were, and yet we've been talking about having 8 to 12 units per acre. I think any bylaw has to do a study on the maximum build out of that corridor because it impacts everything. And if my quick math here, just finding that out, 8 to 12 units per acre would mean a total of 288 units of housing within that short 900-foot corridor. And that could be upwards of 720 bedrooms. So I think the 2 things you want to look at is to find out what the maximum build out is. And then you have to look at the maximum bedrooms, and then you have to do a traffic study to find out how many cars are going to be permitted for each of those units. And if we're talking 1 to 2 cars, you're talking 500 cars parked, not business, just residential, entering and exiting multiple times a day. Because everybody does. They got to pick up their kids at school, they've got to go to the store. And then you have to look at the water usage. First of all, it's in the water protection area. We have problems with water. And you have to do a water study as to how the impact of 720 buildings, or excuse me, bedrooms, would impact that. So, I mean, I think this is a long way from prime time. That is a very narrow corridor, and you are talking numbers that are significant in terms of people and housing that could go in there. And I think it has to be written in the bylaw. And I think you have to make a determination about how many bedrooms or how many units per acre before this thing can go anywhere, so that we would know the impact. And I guess if the RPZ, I don't believe the RPZ is a separate issue. The fact of the matter is the FAA says you can't build there. And I think that it is a planning board bylaw, and it should be included in this one, an up or down vote with the overlay, because you cannot pass a bylaw, the underlay, if you want to call it that, with the potential of the overlay failing, because then you'd be in violation of FAA prohibitions. It has to be one bylaw with 2 parts, or one warrant article with 2 parts, up or down, because town council has said, if the planning board knows, which you do now, that the RPZ prohibits gathering of human people on the ground because it's dangerous, I don't see how you can approve a bylaw without having that overlay included in it as one single bylaw. Those are my comments for now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gibbs. I see another hand up, Paula Lofgren.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair. Yes, Paula Lofgren. Thanks for the opportunity for commenting this evening. I have a question and also a comment, and it concerns the RPZ overlay district. That if you have it as, I do understand that they're going to put RPZ overlay on both sides of the runway, which I think is important for protection. But I'm concerned, what happens if the West Chatham development goes forward, but then the RPZ warrant does not get passed, so that you have no voted on overlay district for the West Chatham corridor?
I think that's, I mean, I don't know that we are mature to answer that question. That's something that we would need to consider. In some sense, if I may say so, you'd have the same situation that you have right now, because right now it's zoned GB3, which on the one side, and on the other side, it's zoned residential. So in some sense, whatever the underlying zoning is, you have that situation that we do not have an RPZ zoning overlay district that goes over and supersedes the GB3 zoning or the residential zoning. And admittedly, while the proposed West Chatham Neighborhood Center does propose some greater density with residential use, I think in terms of overall use and overall impact, GB3 also, if, for example, I mean, I think this might require more detailed study, but if the whole of West Chatham Neighborhood Center were built out according to GB3, that is also quite a bit of not residential use, but density of commercial use. So we have that situation right now, that situation that you're suggesting, but I think it's a very good question. And I think it's something that the board, you know, again, that will need to consider carefully. There might be some solutions that could be proposed to the question that you bring up. So did you have any other comments or questions, Lofgren?
Much for the answer. To that end, I really believe that the West Chatham Neighborhood Center District zoning must include an RPZ overlay district for the simple thing of not keeping the present situation going forward. It's for the protection of the people and the property on the ground. And my belief is it should all be within one warrant article. I also believe that the Airport Commission has done its due diligence by informing the Planning Board of the dangers and appropriateness of the development within the RPZ. So I really feel that the responsibility now falls to the Planning Board, not the Airport Commission, to include this zoning as part of town policy and to have it distinctly within the warrant article so that it doesn't by any means have a chance to not pass. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Great. Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Lofgren. Your comments are appreciated. And I also see Gloria Freeman's hand is raised. Gloria, did you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. I'm Gloria Freeman. It's certainly good for the town to have a blueprint, but there is so much that's wrong with this proposal, it's hard to know where to begin. I'm glad, as you mentioned, it is just a draft. I'm going to start with the absence of any mention of the airport's runway protection zones. Town council described it to you that there can be no additional development or redevelopment in the RPZs. He was quite clear, and at that time, Chairperson Halpern fully agreed with him. We know we don't have an overlay district now, but we certainly should. We all know that the RPZ has been overlooked in the past, but town council provided guidance to you. If you go ahead without providing an overlay district to prohibit development and redevelopment in the RPZ, not only could the town face liability should there be an accident, but according to town council, it would be guilty of ignoring FAA guidance. Here's another shocker, and correct me if I'm wrong. You have asked the Airport Commission to bring an overlay district zoning amendment to our May annual town meeting. And at your last meeting, your chairperson told the Airport Commission chairman that the planning board can work to defeat it. Does the Cape Cod Commission really want to be part of the smoke and mirrors scheme? Because that is what it looks like. The planning board brings the West Chatham proposal with its opportunity for tremendous density, and the Airport Commission brings the overlay district amendment. There should be no separation of the two. If the planning board works to defeat the overlay district amendment, what is that other than smoke and mirrors? Then there is our well and water contamination issues. Some planning board members have suggested up to 36 bedrooms per acre. That could easily provide serious problems for increased water usage and increased traffic. Before the density is decided, I agree, a traffic study should be conducted to see if that roadway can support such additional usage, especially during the summer. I know I've said this before to both the Planning Board and the Cape Cod Commission staff, but this plan could not possibly be construed to implement the long-range comprehensive plan. It is a land use zoning amendment, and the land use section of the comprehensive plan could not be any clearer. Bylaws and regulations that I'm quoting should be created to ensure that intensity is maintained or minimized, never maximized. Up to 36 bedrooms per acre is maximizing density. Throughout the comprehensive plan, there are policies directing that various issues shall be strictly guided by the plan's first land use section goal. And that's the one that refers to never maximizing density. While not inclusive, here are a few of the plan's objectives. To conduct any effort with an understanding of the town's carrying capacity. I've seen nothing that shows you have done that. To contain commercial activity to what already exists and provide consideration to local services. To maintain overall density for multifamily use. Maintain overall density. To preserve and expand open space. To provide an adequate supply of safe potable water. I could go on. Your proposal does none of that. You are planning expansive buildings. The setbacks are too close to the road. You've even talked about buildings 3 stories high. You need to read the comprehensive plan you claim to be implementing, especially the land use section, which, by the way, is the planning board's master plan for the town. This is not the time nor the place for this plan, and I thank you for letting me talk with you.
Thank you, Gloria. And I do see a couple of other hands raised. Rick Levitt. Now, Mr. Levitt, before you begin, I just want to mention we do have your memo that I was going to read, but if you would prefer to read it or to cover the points in the memo that you sent us, that would also be fine. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. There's been a lot said here tonight. I want to simply compliment the board, your board, and your entire team for fleshing out details of Chatham's voter-approved comprehensive plan for West Chatham Center. This land use plan that you have drafted will be as successful as the Main Street Improvement Plan has been. As you point out, Chatham voters want to preserve Chatham's character, promote pedestrian-friendly design and development in West Chatham Center, and importantly, encourage workforce housing at all levels of income here. When I say here, I live in West Chatham Center, as opposed to so many other comments coming here tonight. There is no greater challenge facing Chatham today than providing workforce housing. Your plan helps meet this challenge. I have some suggestions I hope are constructive. The zoning board's observation when you met with them that the residential zone north side of West Chatham Center should be included in the mixed-use zoning district is a good suggestion. Parts of this area already are mixed use with apartments, shops, offices, and Captain Harding Park. They are an important part of West Chatham Center and should not be excluded. Secondly, encourage greater housing options. In addition to multifamily, allow smaller one-family homes on small lots in zones A1 and B, with a maximum lot size of 5,000 feet. Clusters of smaller homes on small lots are found behind shops downtown, on Bursar's Byway, behind the library and bank. and behind the Mayflower complex. There are underdeveloped areas like these in West Chatham Center behind Zone A, ideal for mixed income, one-family homes on small lots. One is the post office site. The draft plans, your draft plans, bonus rules, provide needed affordable housing for workers there. Lower cost in-town living that existed before Chatham's downtown became gentrified is ripe for West Chatham Center development. This very traditional development pattern was proven successful again recently in Brewster and Dennis centers on historic Route 6A, where Union Studio architects designed small home, mixed income, cluster zoning. Third, I agree with HBDC. 75-foot building frontage in Zone A facing Main Street is desirable. For buildings over 50 feet in length, require that they be broken into smaller components that are stepped back from each other. A good example is the recently renovated Mayflower complex downtown. 4, reduce minimum Main Street frontage setback to 0 feet. It will increase space for rear parking and alleys for shared parking. Sites like Shop Ahoy, just around the corner from me, are restricted by geographical limitations, a steep grade in the back, and need greater flexibility. Sidewalk frontage, notwithstanding the comments here earlier tonight, sidewalk frontage enhances the pedestrian experience while visually narrowing Main Street, helping to further calm traffic. 5, and I'm getting close to finishing. 5, there may be good reasons for allowing building heights marginally higher than 30 feet. The planning board and zoning board should have flexibility to approve applications no higher than the highest structures in West Chatham Center today. Historic Fishermen's Alliance and Dunkin' Donuts buildings, both with apartments over. Finally, I don't advise adding a controversial overlay dead zone to this plan. Experience has taught that controversial zoning bylaw changes rarely achieve the required 2/3 vote. Dead zone should be a separate action at town meeting, just like the boundaries you plan. And thank you so much. I will submit this to Ally in writing.
Great. Thank you, Rick. And I just wanted to, this is Catherine, I just wanted to ask you, you did submit in writing a memo a few weeks ago. Do you want me to read that now, or do you feel you've covered the points you want to cover?
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for asking. No, you don't need to read it now. I think I've covered my points.
Great. Thank you so much, Rick. And I thank you very much. I think I saw another hand, Nicole Stern. Nicole Stern, would you like to go ahead and speak?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. I'm listening very carefully to everybody's point of view, but I find it very difficult to believe that any citizen would vote for this article unless there was an overlay district article to prevent development and redevelopment in the runway protection zone. Aren't we trying to help people? Who would vote to put our community members' safety and health at risk by putting people in a runway protection zone that's meant for planes that could come in short or overrun the runway? It just doesn't make any sense. These are not second-class people. They're entitled to live somewhere where it's safe and where they don't have to be concerned that they're living in a crash zone. So I find this very difficult to understand and make any sense of. The public regards the FAA as the ruler as of lately, and yet we're completely ignoring the fact that they require runway protection zones, crash zones, to be empty of residents and any other place that creates a gathering of people. And everything that's been discussed tonight is a gathering of people. Plus, of course, all the other very important issues on density and on water, which everyone is concerned about. I don't think we need lawsuits, and God forbid we don't need people getting killed because they're living in a runway protection zone. So I think this all has to be rethought. Logically, it makes no sense what we're talking about right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Stern. And again, I see Steve Buckley, your hand is still raised. Is it raised from before, or did you have some additional comments?
Yes, I'm sorry. I do have additional comments, and I had left it up inadvertently. So thank you for recognizing that.
That's right. Go ahead.
The issue that was just being discussed, it would be nice to know, and I actually used to work for the FAA in Washington, D.C., and even I don't understand whether or not it's FAA guidance, as Gloria had just, I'm sorry, previous speaker had just said, Ms. Freeman had said FAA guidance. Well, is it guidance or is it a diktat? That, and I've heard there's the Board of Selectmen has talked a lot about it and so forth. It needs to come down. It's like, wait a minute, does the town of Chatham actually have any power to veto, in essence, an RPZ that what the Airport Commission wants to do with the landing zones or not? That needs to be cleared up. Not like, I guess it kind of sort of, I've heard Board of Selectmen members say, well, it seems like that's the case. No, is it or is it? Have we lost control of the airport or not? Because if we have, then that should be cleared up first, and whether that's a meeting article at town meeting or what, and then go forward with that without that cloud hanging over us. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. This is Catherine again. I'll just comment that, as I mentioned before, because the overlay district for the runway protection zone would be a separate action, we are planning a future meeting where those issues and questions such as the one you just asked would be addressed. So those will be, I won't answer it now. I actually don't know the answer. We would have, the FAA consultant to the airport answer a question like that, but we are planning a future meeting where those issues would be discussed and addressed. So I'm going to invite you to listen to that meeting. And let me just see if I see other hands raised, any other comments. And I don't see any other hands raised, except I do see Ms. Freeman again. Would you like to speak again?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Halpern. I would. During your initial presentation, you referenced that there is a South Chatham overlay district. What you didn't reference is that the purpose of that district is to provide for limited commercial and business development while preserving the historic seaside village character of the neighborhood. And the overlay district is approximately 300 feet by 300 feet. I'd guess that if there was the same purpose and size proposed for West Chatham, no one would be complaining. There is no comparison between these two overlay districts. Be honest, your plans are to create more diverse housing types attainable to residents of all income levels. That's a legitimate purpose if you comply with the goal of the land use section and of your master plan for the town of Chatham, that density will not be maximized. But please, please do not tell us that what you have proposed is to implement the goals of the town's comprehensive plan or to preserve and enhance the existing character of the West Chatham Neighborhood Center. It just isn't so. Thank you again.
Thank you, Gloria. I don't see any other hands raised. I'll ask if there is anyone connected to the call who would like to offer any additional comments. If not, we did receive a couple comments in writing. Mr. Levitt has said that he's covered his points, but I do have one letter that I should read. So I'll just check again if there is anyone who would like to speak. If not, if you'll give me a moment, I just need to look for this letter in my files. One moment, please. Okay.
Catherine, I believe Steve
Yes.
Buckley raised his hand.
All right, Mr. Buckley, please go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to clarify something that Ms. Freeman just said about the land use section of the comprehensive plan. And like I said, I was on the committee that helped draft, as was Ms. Freeman. Bylaws and regulations should be created.
We're getting quite a bit of feedback. So
Okay, I'll try again.
someone needs to turn off their mic. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Bylaws and regulations should be created to ensure that intensity is maintained or minimized, never maximized. I wish I had raised my concerns at the time we were drafting that, because that is contrary to the idea of increasing density in the neighborhood districts. The whole gist of the plan was to minimize between neighborhood or village districts and take that development and put it in neighborhood/village districts. So some people were all happy about creating residential between the village districts, but then they also wanted to have it so that, but they didn't want to increase the density in the districts. So the idea of never maximizing, meaning we can't increase development in the neighborhood districts. So that sentence contradicts the whole gist, my opinion, of what we were trying to accomplish with the long range plan of shifting density towards the village districts away, So Ms. Freeman's brought that up a number of times, but to me it contradicts the overall strategy, that particular sentence. So I've always wanted to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. And let me just check, are there any other hands raised at the moment? Otherwise, I shall read this letter. We did get some written input. This is from Judy Patterson in West Chatham, and she sent us by email. She says, "Good morning. I cannot tell you how disgusted I am with the plans for the West Chatham corridor. Granted, zoning amendments were approved by town meeting. As shown by previous town meetings, this can certainly go before town meeting again, and the vote can be reversed, or it can just be defeated. With the ongoing mess with the airport and the runway protection zone, how dare you even consider this zoning change? Your goal is to put affordable housing and business in the middle of a runway protection zone. This goes against FAA regulations. I think it's time for you to concentrate on another area of Chatham and leave West Chatham as is, and that is from Judy Patterson in West Chatham. So now just let me check and see. Do we have any other hands raised? Is there anyone else connected to the call who would like to offer a comment or questions? I'll give a few minutes in case anyone is muted. Great. I don't see any other hands raised. And this is the last item on our agenda. I just want to say to everyone in the public who's made comments that, again, what our process will be is we'll take all the comments we've received tonight and any more that come in by writing, and we'll be looking at them.
Hello. You've been muted. To unmute yourself, press *6.
Hold on one moment. Hold on. So again, we're getting a lot of feedback. I do see Ally's hand is raised. So I'm going to ask Ally to speak.
I just wanted to remind the callers, thank you, Catherine, that if they did want to speak, the people who have called.
You've been muted.
So
to unmute yourself.
If I could just ask everyone connected to the call, please be sure that your microphone is muted, and except for planning board members and Ally, could you disable your video? Because we're just getting a lot of feedback right now. So Ally, please go ahead.
Thank you, Catherine. I just wanted to remind, if you did call in on the phone, in order to unmute yourself, you have to press *6 on your phone, and that might help.
All right. I'll just check again and see if there's any hands raised.
Hello?
Yes, is there someone trying to speak?
Yes.
Can you give us your name, please?
It's Ronald Meservey.
Oh, hello, Mr. Meservey. Please go ahead.
I've been having a lot of fun with my telephone here.
All right. Please go ahead.
As you know, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. As you know, I'm a property owner in West Chatham. And I'm saddened by the fact that after 82 years of living in Chatham and owning my property for 50, that I now have to defend it for future use. Now, I oppose the runway protection zone and I oppose an overlay. I only oppose the overlay because I'm not sure exactly what it's going to consist of at this time. But I do know that it's going to cover a quarter of my property and will definitely lower its value and make it more difficult in the future to develop it. So in order to have a successful village, you need to have a balance of housing and commercial use. And you're not going to do that by creating an overlay. For example, let's take Ocean State Job Lot, for instance. A lot of changes have gone on there in that property over the years. It used to be a motorcycle racetrack. And then it became a grocery store. And then after the grocery store left, it was going to become an automobile dealership, but that backed out. And now it's a discount department store. Well, someday, the owners of that property might want to do what the Cape Cod Commission is recommending. Tear down that old building that's almost 50 years old and move it up front along 28 and possibly have parking in the back and maybe even some residential area. With an overlay district, that might not be possible. So you're sort of defeating your village concept. Now, I know that the Airport Commission is concerned about safety, and I'm going to briefly talk about that. Airplane accidents in the last 82 years that I've been here. There was a World War II restored plane that took off from the airport and crash landed in the woods east of the job lot property out of the so-called overlay district. There was a plane that flew in from Washington, D.C. to make a landing. He also crashed in the woods east of job lot property outside the district. There was a plane that landed in Hardings Beach parking lot safely, but still way outside the overlay district. There was a helicopter that crashed over on Round Cove outside the district. Then we had a skydive plane that crashed in Lovers Lake, still outside the proposed district. And just recently, we had a plane crash off of North Beach, again, outside the district. We've had one plane that I know of in the last 82 years, and that plane came in at night without the runway lights on and skidded off the end of the runway. After 82 years, one minor accident doesn't justify an overlay district. There was a pilot that made a comment to your last planning board meeting. He said airplanes today are by far safer than they used to be, and that the Chatham Airport is seeing a lot less traffic. Chatham Airport services a select few, but a well-developed village will service thousands, both residential and vacationers. But this will only happen if the planning board opens its doors and help with development and not close its doors and create restrictions. So thank you very much for my time, with your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meservey. And let me just see if there's any more hands raised. I don't see any more hands raised, but I'm going to ask anyone connected to the call who would like to make comments. Please speak up. Yes.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please give us your name, and if you're connected by phone, the last 4 digits of your phone number.
Yes, it's Dr. David. Hello?
Dr. David? Yes, you cut out for a bit there, Dr. David.
Burns, president of West Chatham Association.
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Burns.
Yes, I'd like to make some comments while I can tell you what I think of the zoning proposal for West Chatham, which is, in short, not what West Chatham wants or needs. I prefer to focus on the lack of sense that the whole project makes. The suggestion that this is to implement a long-range comprehensive plan is a myth, as Ms. Friedman has stated. Your claim that for your proposal is based on visioning sessions with West Chatham residents could not be more wrong. More than 100 of our residents showed up for these meetings, some in the middle of winter time, and what you're proposing is in direct opposition to what the residents have outlined for their neighborhood center. Properties lining Route 28 we provided the boundaries, which would be the property lines, no deeper than that, and yet bordering Route 28. Yet parcels we see on your diagrams, these parcels are 3 lots deep on George Ryder Road, and the parcels on Sequoncet are maybe 200 feet off of Route 28, which is not acceptable. You are providing high density buildings in the airport runway protection zone, the Cape Cod Commission, Regional Land Use Planning Agency, and as if there was not that air of the airport in West Chatham. And additionally, Chatham has a serious water problem. Until we have enough water to pump the quality of water we need, until our water is no longer contaminated, until we can water our vegetable gardens and our flower gardens and wash down our boats, there should be no massive development in Chatham. The proposal also expands commercial activity, and the long-range comprehensive plan states should be contained to what already exists. It makes no sense, your proposal. I could go on, but members and officers of the West Chatham Association were strictly against having a development as outlined in your program. And this is not the time to place such zoning, in particular in a RPZ, which is a runway protection zone, and the proximity to the airport. What a disappointment this whole effort that you have put in has turned out to be. And thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. I do see that, Elaine, you have your hand raised again. Did you want to make a comment?
Yes, thank you. The reason why there are runway protection zones is that most accidents do occur on takeoff and landing. The FAA has experience with this. I have to, talk about the accidents recently that could have happened in that area. The Cape Air crash in Provincetown, their runway is out near the water. Had that occurred in Chatham, there would have been casualties on the ground. The person who lost his life on Nauset Beach was on his way to Chatham. I don't think we should be saying, well, we're really lucky it hasn't happened. There is a reason for runway protection zones. And I guess I find it really kind of morally wrong that what I'm hearing here is let's stick all the affordable housing in that area in the runway protection zone. Let's put some in the basement. Let's make it 3 stories high. For people who have few options, there are going to be families living there. And I think it's really wrong to even consider it. I think the solution is very simple. You can expand the district on the north side and then isolate that area with no further development. I don't think there should be a trade-off about, businesses and a walking community if you're putting people's lives at risk, because that's what it is. And the fact that it's been overlooked and ignored for so many years does not justify continuing to do it now that we know about it. I mean, nobody knew. Every committee said, we didn't know what an RPZ was. The Zoning Board of Appeals didn't know, but now you do, and you can't ignore it. So I really hope you think about that and say, are we doing the right thing for the people of this town? Or will it take a little more effort to be a little bit more creative about how we do affordable housing in neighborhoods where, parents don't have to worry about, planes flying over at, 200 or 300 feet as they're trying to land on the runway in bigger planes. And the fact of the matter is they're bigger and they're faster and they carry a lot more fuel. And so when they go down, it can cause a lot of damage. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. I didn't see any more hands raised, but I'm just going to ask if there's anyone connected to the call, if there's any more comments that anyone would like to make. And again, just a reminder that we'll also continue to accept written comments, send them to Ally's email, and at least through January 1st, we do want to hear from you. But is there anyone connected who would like to make a comment? Otherwise, we'll move ahead. So I don't see any hands raised. Again, this is Catherine. So if there's, again, just a reminder, you're free to continue to look at the draft, look at all the issues. Please, we do want to hear from you. Please continue to submit your comments in writing. And if there's no more comments, I'm going to ask for a motion. We actually don't have any other agenda items for tonight. I want to thank everyone for participating. Thank you to Chloe and to the Cape Cod Commission for your presentation. Thank you to the public for all of your comments. Thank you to everyone who's made a comment. But with that, I would ask a board member to make a motion that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
Madam Chairman, Warren Chang, I so move.
Thank you, Warren.
I second Art Spru.
Thank you. So let's do our roll call vote. Art Spru.
Art Spru, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approved.
Tom Gagan.
Tom Gagan, approve.
Thank you. Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve that we adjourn tonight's meeting. Let's note the time as 7:12. And again, thank you everyone for your participation. Thank you to everyone who joined and for your comments. And we appreciate your participation. And everyone, please enjoy the rest of the evening.